Well, we've just heard a reading from Matthew's Gospel in which Jesus speaks of a harvest that is ready to be reaped. And for those of you who are farmers, and I guess quite a number of you watching this morning and worshipping in churches around New South Wales will be farmers, you know that this is not the time of the year when harvest comes in. Harvest normally comes in late spring or early summer. And here we are in early winter. We need to realise that the lectionary readings were set by people in the Northern Hemisphere, and we are sort of dictated to by the way they've set up the readings. You will recognise then that in the Northern Hemisphere it will be early summer now, and there will be many farmers in the Northern Hemisphere who are busy getting in their harvest even as we worship God this morning. And so this reading for them is a most appropriate, meaningful passage to read when they recognise the similarities we've been bringing in a harvest of their farms and the spiritual harvest of which Jesus is speaking. And yet Jesus recognises the harvest is too great for him to handle alone. And this is also true, I know, for farmers who have large farms with a large crop of wheat or canola to bring in, that they have to get extra people in to help. While I was ministering in the Young region, one of the places I worshipped at with the people was in Bribri, where the whole entire congregation were made up of families who were farming families. And I know of one particular family there who, from late spring to middle of summer, were engaged in helping other people with their harvest. They'd go up to Moree and gradually work their way down with all their expensive equipment. And Jesus too recognises that this harvest that he sees, the people in need, is too great for him to handle alone. And he's already expanded his following to include Simon, Andrew, James and John. And in this chapter we find that he expands that faction even further. He adds another 8 names to the number of followers that he has. And by the final chapter of Matthew, we see even further expansion of this group of followers, which now includes women. And if you read between the lines in the last couple of verses, we'll see that it also includes people from other cultural groups. And now we, the gathered community of Christ, we are the continuation of Jesus' band of followers. Now, I just want to tell you of another harvest that I was involved in, as a spiritual harvest. I was going into Parramatta Prison every Saturday morning with a friend through the work of Prison Fellowship, and we recognised that what we were doing there, which was running a Bible study group and just talking to individual people we met in the yard, that we were only touching a very small number of the people who were in that place. It was, I think there was something like about 500 or 600 people in Parramatta Prison at that time. We were meeting with about 10 or 12, and so we knew there was something needed to be done. And we heard about a program in America called Kairos Prison Ministry, which works on quite a different basis of a team of 42 people going into a prison at a time, and not just for a morning, but for 3 days. And so a couple of people and myself got together, and we had this as a vision, and we prayed about it, and we gradually gathered more and more people together. It was very difficult. There were times when we were almost ready to give up. There were times when I was in tears over this, and then a letter would come from the United States of America where this program started, and we'd be G'd up again. Finally, it got going. In 1995, it got going. And from then, and some of you watching this may actually be involved in Kairos Prison Ministry, it's now grown and operating in quite a number of prisons in New South Wales and other states of Australia, and involving hundreds, if not thousands, of residents of prisons and many hundreds of volunteers. Another example of the Holy Spirit raising up people to bring in the harvest. If we go back to the Bible story now and just think about Jesus' actions, what was it that motivated him? Well, according to the passage, he was curing people of every disease and every sickness. And when he saw the crowds, he had compassion. Now, the word compassion in the Greek actually a more literal translation would be a wrenching of the guts. A wrenching of the guts. That feeling we get deep inside of ourselves when we know something is wrong and it really upsets us and makes us sometimes even feel sick on the stomach because of what we see going on around us. Now, Jesus was moved to this form of compassion because of the political and economic situation in his time, where a small minority who were working with the Roman Empire were using their position of power to exploit the poor, and he was moved to do something. And so he was proclaiming an alternate vision for the way the world might be. He calls this vision in Matthew's Gospel the kingdom of heaven. And the purpose of the kingdom of heaven is that as an alternate way of seeing the world and the world operating. Instead of being power and violence and military might, it's a way of compassion and love and caring for the least among us. And Jesus wasn't going to wait for this to happen. He was living as though this was already happening. And that's why he was going around alleviating the suffering of the people. But he knew the task was too big for just the 5 of them, and so he called for prayer to help. In this, we find a model for the church. I wonder, what are the situations that cause you to feel a wrench in the guts, to feel that deep compassion? What are the causes of this situation? To whom will you go for help? How will you pray over this situation? And how will you proclaim opposition to the causes of these terrible situations? And in the meantime, what can you do to alleviate the suffering? In this entire passage, we see a very daunting task for those of us who think of ourselves as disciples of Jesus. And there's one verse that gives us a glimmer of hope. It says, "It is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you." By reading the passage in the context of the entire Gospel of Matthew, we receive much more encouragement. But for now, this is enough. When we meet opposition, as we will if we dare to address the cause of social ills, this verse is the promise that we are not alone. When we proclaim the alternate way of looking at the world, the alternate way to the dominant messages of the bottom line and economic growth, that is the alternate reign to the power of money, namely the kingdom of heaven, then justice, peace, mercy, forgiveness and love will follow, because it's the eternal Spirit of God, the one in whom we live and move and have our being, who gives us the words to say, and I would suggest the courage to proceed.